The Broncos received good news this Friday. The last season was quite a success story for the Broncos. They made it to the playoffs after 2015. This is huge, and this is all because of their coaching system. Now, some may argue that their rookie quarterback performed exceptionally well. Yes, this is true, but going with a rookie QB all in all and achieving such kind of success is also a coaching success. And now, the Broncos are in a much more favorable position. How? Let me explain it to you. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover all AFC West news here on this channel. So the good news is that Vance Joseph is apparently coming back. It looks like as head coaching positions begin to fill up the Raiders and Jets, Joseph will return as the Broncos defensive coordinator. I know some of you might not think this is a good move, but I honestly don't understand how you could come to that conclusion. Yes, the defense didn't have a great December. It wasn't exactly a December to remember, as some might hope. But let's not overlook the bigger picture. Vance Joseph led the NFL in sacks. Before the season started, if you asked anyone to name a pass rusher on this team, they probably couldn't have. So, considering what he had to work with, I'd say he did a pretty solid job. He had one first-round pick on the starting 11 defensively and still managed to build a formidable defense. Given that, I'd say it's a win for the Broncos to keep Joseph as their defensive coordinator. Now, it is confirmed that the Raiders hired Pete Carroll as their head coach. We're looking at a serious gauntlet of coaches in the AFC West, and it's an old-school one at that. Andy Reid, Sean Payton, Pete Carroll, and Jim Harbaugh are all in the mix. Peyton is the youngest of the bunch, but only by a few days, edging out Jim Harbaugh. Pete Carroll, at 73 years old, just got a 3-year contract. And Andy Reid, who isn't quite 70 yet, but is getting up there, isn't far behind. So yeah, it's a group of older coaches, but what they lack in age, they more than make up for in experience. These guys have plenty of Super Bowls between them, with some even having come close to a third. If you're just going by resumes, you could argue that this group is as tough as it gets. There are no more easy wins in the division. Not that the Broncos ever had any gimmies over the past few years, but last season, at least the games against the Raiders were a bit easier. The Raiders were such a mess and not well run that when you look at Denver's 10 wins in 2024, the 2 against the Raiders were probably among the easier ones. No one's going to argue with that, right? But in 2025, that's not going to be the case. The Raiders are about to be a much tougher opponent with the changes they've made. So looking ahead to Denver's schedule, we don't know exactly when the games will be, but we do know who they'll face and where they'll play. You've got your usual suspects in the AFC West, but thankfully when you look at their upcoming opponents, the Broncos do seem to have a somewhat favorable schedule, especially considering the divisions they'll be up against. For instance, the AFC South continues to be weak, so the Broncos will play teams like the Jaguars and Titans, both of which are picking in the top 5. The Cowboys also seem to be trending backward, and the Giants are picking 3rd. The Bengals will definitely be a tough matchup, and the Packers are a solid team. But looking at the home games, there are some very winnable matchups in there, no doubt. Now, when you look at the road opponents, it's not going to be as easy. The Broncos will be traveling to Houston, and that won't be a walk in the park. The same goes for Indianapolis, as well as the Eagles and the Commanders, 2 teams that will be playing in the NFC Championship this Sunday. And then, of course, there's the Jets. But given their dysfunction, I'm just not taking them seriously. But when it comes to the home games, there are definitely some manageable matchups. Of course, we shouldn't get too attached to the schedule just yet, because a lot can change during the season with injuries or other factors. But this next part is a bit of a hot take. I don't believe it with every fiber of my being, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I think every AFC West team could go above 500. I really believe Pete Carroll is that good of a coach. He can step into Las Vegas, get players in line, and have things running smoothly and efficiently. Looking at the AFC North with the Browns, Steelers, Ravens, and Bengals, all those teams went above .500, so it's definitely not impossible for the AFC West to see the same. It's something to consider, especially given how competitive the division is shaping up to be. As soon as Pete Carroll was announced as the new head coach for the Raiders, rumors immediately started swirling about the possibility of Russell Wilson teaming up with Carroll again. I'm not entirely sure who's to blame for the breakup, but from what I understand, Carroll always took Russell's side. When Russell joined the team as a rookie, he kept his head down, and the defense largely carried the team. But as the defense started to decline and the offense began to improve, things got a bit tense. People on the defense were starting to feel like Russell was getting more attention, which caused some friction. As tensions grew, there were players on the defense who became increasingly annoyed with Russell Wilson's antics and his entourage. Disputes and disagreements started to surface, but through it all, Pete Carroll always took Russ's side. In fact, the Seahawks may have kept Wilson around for a season or 2 longer than some might have wanted, largely because of Carroll's support. Of course, this is just what I've heard, and the 2 of them know the full story. What's clear, though, is that they seem to have maintained a good relationship. After Carroll retired and Russell was pushed out by the Seahawks, Wilson actually returned to Seattle to celebrate with Carroll and some former Seahawks players. So it wouldn't be completely out of the question for Russell Wilson to reunite with Pete Carroll. Now, could Wilson be heading to Las Vegas? He could go back to Pittsburgh, but honestly, I'm not sure if the Steelers even want him at this point. The year ended on a 5-game losing streak, and a lot of those losses could be pinned on Wilson. If another team out there is willing to give him a shot, he's all in. Plus, remember last offseason, Wilson was reportedly interested in going to the Raiders. Ian Rappaport put this out, so with that trail of reports, it's clear Wilson wanted to head to Sin City. So we're talking about cities like Chicago, New York, and Las Vegas. But it looks like Wilson's not going to Chicago anymore, and New York isn't exactly on the table either. Sure, maybe the Giants or the Jets, but when you break it all down, the Raiders do seem like a really good fit for him. So here's my bold take. Russell Wilson is going to the Raiders. I believe he's going to team up with Pete Carroll, and together, they're going to make that Raiders team better. Carroll will probably get the most out of Wilson. They'll build a stronger staff, and I think he'll bring the best out of that Raiders roster and locker room as well. Now, where does Russell stand as a current quarterback? Well, let's be honest. He's not at his peak anymore. We all saw that in Denver, and I'm not saying anything new here, but I still believe he's probably one of the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. What that means is it's tough to find 32 better starters than him. That doesn't automatically mean he's still a starter, though. Other teams might look at him and think, well, what if he's just the 25th best quarterback? Maybe we'd rather take a chance on a rookie who could potentially develop into a top 5, top 10 quarterback. It's a tricky spot for Wilson right now. We've seen a lot of back and forth on where he fits into the league, especially with some of the uncertainty around his future. So, speaking of coaches, there was an interesting moment on the Pat McAfee show where Russell Wilson was talking about some of his favorite coaches, and he didn't mention Sean Payton at all. He listed off coaches like Pete Carroll and Mike Tomlin, but skipped over Payton. It wasn't exactly a slight, but it definitely raised some eyebrows. It seemed like a subtle jab, or maybe just an oversight. But either way, it makes the upcoming matchup between Russell Wilson and Sean Payton twice a season that much more intriguing. Last year, we were robbed of this matchup because of Russell Wilson's injury early in the season. Instead of Wilson, we got Justin Fields coming to Denver. But it looks like we won't be waiting too long to see Wilson and Payton face off. If Wilson heads to Vegas, I'm hoping that in week 1, we get Broncos versus Raiders with Pete Carroll making his debut for the Raiders, hopefully on Monday night. Can you imagine the storyline? Pete Carroll's return to the NFL, along with Russell Wilson coming back to Denver? It's a matchup that could definitely headline the opening week. They did it when Russell returned to Seattle, so why not do it again when he comes back to Denver? And that's a wrap for today's video. As we look ahead to the 2025 season, it's clear that the AFC West is shaping up to be one of the most competitive divisions in football. With the Broncos making some key moves and a fresh batch of exciting matchups on the horizon, it's going to be a wild ride. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think Russell Wilson will be a good fit with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas, and how do you think he'll perform in a new system? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm excited to see what you all think. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our AFC West coverage. Catch you in the next one.